I feel silly showing you this because I think it's all got to be super basic to you, but obviously you recognize price, quantity, supply and demand curves, and picture a stock company, let's say they cross at $40. Somebody shows up and starts selling these FTDs into the market. Well, what's he doing? He's increasing supply. He's moving the supply line to the right. So watch where supply and demand cross. Well, as he does this more and more, the supply line is going to keep shifting to the right, and where supply and demand meet is going to drop. There are some companies where the number of FTDs in the marketplace are a significant fraction of, and conceivably even in some cases a multiple of, the number of actual shares. Well, what that does is look where supply and demand cross. Of course, the price is going to collapse and could become a $30 stock, could become a penny stock. If it's a penny stock, demand dries up, a ceiling forms over the stock. The FTDs they're basically stock IOUs. They become penny IOUs. The firm's a penny stock. A death spiral ensues because customers shun the firm, depending on the type of firm. Capital markets shun the firm. Firm can't recover. Of course, can't raise money even in pipes, products, and technologies. And you all understand, I won't go into the dynamics really, but the perfect victims for this are tech companies, biotech companies, and small financial companies. They're the ideal victims for a bunch of reasons, primarily because it's easiest to create the most doubt in the public about them if you have some captured journalists who are willing to shill for you. The shareholder value is destroyed, jobs are disappeared. Basically, society is screwed, in particular because the guy doing this gets to keep his cash and not pay tax until or unless the firm goes bankrupt. And even then, this whole system of reporting and paying tax on that is apparently quite, it's broken. Of this, now, Shapiro has said, this is Bloomberg.
Former Undersecretary of Commerce Robert Shapiro works as a consultant for lawyers representing alleged victims of naked short sellers. He says as many as 1,000 public companies were damaged by naked shorting in the decade it took to get Reg Show into the rule books.
A lot of those companies are gone. A lot of them died. This was a fatal attack. Now, some of them were weak when they were attacked. Some of them would have failed anyway. Others wouldn't have. Again, it's not up to the naked short sellers to decide. It's up to the investors that play by the rules.
Again, I just put that up. It's like, who knew? I mean, I've been in this public fight with people who are making the most ridiculous position, taking the most ridiculous position. You can't go into a hospital, into a pneumonia ward, smother a bunch of people, and then say, oh, well, they probably would have died anyway. Who really knows who would have died? No, you can't do that. You can't sell things that don't exist. You can't manipulate stocks. Some of these companies would have died. Some of them are no good. Some of them are crooks. Some of them are just little biotech professors trying to develop something. It's up to the marketplace to decide, not up to people who counterfeit stock. The big problem, and I admit this is only a possible problem, is the possibility of systemic risk. And by that, I mean, if this stuff were ever forced to be cleaned up, what would happen? Well, you understand the dynamics of a short squeeze, and which might make it take more money to clean up than was drained out anyway. In any case, a lot of the money might not be in the system anymore. It may have turned into mansions in the Hamptons. So if this person were ever forced to clean up, to buy in his FTDs, he might run out of money before he runs out of FTDs to clean up, in which case he vapor locks. Well, his prime broker this could ripple through the system in a way. I think, 2 years ago, people laughed at me when I said this. I think people are getting that this isn't such a joke. It could ripple through the system, and in fact, the DTCC took steps 2 years ago such that if, in the case of such of a rippling effect, its counterparty risk sort of goes away, and it goes back to saying, well, that's between you, Lehman, and you, J.P. Morgan, or something, which, of course, obviates the whole point of having a central clearing organization. And it's not such a silly possibility that the SEC, and this is off the SEC website, when they passed Regulation Show, which again was quite tepid, but they grandfathered all of the fails that were in the system. Why? Well, they explain on their website. The grandfathering provisions of Regulation Show were adopted because the SEC was concerned about creating volatility where there were large pre-existing open positions. Now, why is that strange? That's strange because just a year previously, they were denying this existed. They were denying this was any sort of a problem. So the SEC, out of one side of their mouth, has been saying, here's Annette Nazareth saying, oh, anybody talking about this, they just want their stock to go up and stuff, wacky, 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 nothing to it. DTC spokesman doing the same thing. Out of the other side of their mouth, when they're forced to do something about this and to tighten the loophole a little bit, they say the grandfathering provisions were adopted because they were afraid of creating volatility from the large pre-existing open positions that a year previously they were denying existed. That's odd. And in fact, they even said that they couldn't disclose the information because this is right off the SEC website. The fail statistics of individual firms and customers is proprietary and may reflect firms' trading strategies. Now, there's a missing word in that sentence. Bueller? What's the missing word? The missing word's illegal. The fail statistics of individual firms and customers is proprietary information and may reflect those firms' illegal trading strategies. So it's not happening. There are no large batches of FTDs built up in the system, and anyone who says otherwise is just a paranoid and he's mad his stock went down. On the other hand, those large batches that don't exist, we have to grandfather them, and we can't disclose their size. Otherwise, the volatility would disrupt the capital markets and reveal the strategies of the people who've been doing the practicing illegal trading strategies. So they call me wacky, but you ask me, Nurse Ratched, you're the one who's crazy. Okay. The possible large problem, systemic risk. So now we get to the role of the financial press and the cover-up. The financial press. Yeah. My claim about the financial press, rather than me make it, I'm going to let this guy make it.
When your company's in a survival mode, it's really important to defeat Research in Motion and get the Pisanis of the world and the people talking about it as if there's something wrong with RIM. Then you would call the Journal and you get the bozo reporter on Research in Motion and you would feed that there's a Palm's got a killer it's going to give away. These are all the things you must do on a day like today. And if you're not doing it, maybe you shouldn't be in the game.
See, that's all I was saying. I'm saying that a relationship exists among some hedge funds and some financial reporters that's exactly as he describes. That's all I've been saying. Well, might as well go further. These illegal trades, illegal naked short trades, it's hard to do them. It may be possible to do them without leaving a fingerprint in the market, but at least some ways of doing it do leave a thumbprint or a footprint, I'd say, in the market. It's very difficult to find. You need a very good economist and statistical analyst, such as I have here in the room, who's been doing this. And he's got to sort through mountains of data and tie things together. And you can find these footprints. And what's interesting is you can find these footprints often on the Chicago Exchange. It's very complicated. I won't go into the dynamics, but I'm going to talk about the footprints. And I want to talk about the timing of the footprints with some other events. I picked, here's a bunch of companies that are heavily shorted, been on the reg show list, for months or years in most cases. Total number of days on the reg show list on the right. And here are the hedge funds who've been publicly out there saying they're short them. There's Greenlight, there's SAC, there's Rocker and SAC, there's Third Point, there's Rocker. Here are the spikes of the first and second largest spike of this activity. Now, of course, I can't say that these hedge funds are the ones doing it, by the way. But we have gone through the data, and we found where are the first and second largest spikes. And then we've said, when did the Milberg-Weiss lawsuit come in? When did the SEC inquiry come in and get disclosed, and any other significant legal events? And what you find is this very strange pattern. Here's a spike 7 days before the Milberg-Weiss lawsuit was filed. And here's something within a day of each other, and here's a day, and here's a day, and here's 6 days before, and here's the same day, and here's 13 days before. It goes on and on. Here's suits coming in from the SEC, the spike in Chicago 4 days before the suits coming in from the SEC. And it goes on and on. What also is interesting, and this is really going to be the work for some media critic at some point, is on the far right, the stories that have been written about these companies by Herb Greenberg, Roddy Boyd, Carol Ramone, Bethany McLean, every single one, in many cases, multiple stories on this set of companies. And in fact, so could it be coordinated? Well, we don't really have to guess at this point. There's a firm in Arizona called Gradient. There's now about half a dozen employees who have left, giving sworn statements that say, yeah, there's absolutely coordination. One says, I heard many hedge funds request that Gradient delay the release of reports from 3 to 7 days to allow them to take a position in their stocks. In particular, it appeared to me that Rocker, Vickery, and Herb Greenberg were coordinating their attacks. Vickery and Greenberg were coordinating the content and timing of their various reports to please Rocker. And by the way, this isn't just one guy. This is half a dozen people. And 3 of them went to their boss and said, this is illegal. What we're doing here is illegal. A couple days later, they were fired. And of course, Roddy and Carol and people come out and say, well, you can't trust them, they were fired. Well, they were whistleblowers, they got fired. One of them, there's others there who work there who say exactly the same stories. Here's something interesting. This is an employee timesheet from Gradient Analytics. I've crossed out whose it is. But this is the category of how they can track their work, and they can take vacations, they can do holiday, sick pay, personal days, research, office management, or Milberg Weiss. I'll blow that up for you. Milberg Weiss, that's like one of the main categories of that where you track your work there. So you can be in research, you can be in sales, or you can do stuff for Milberg Weiss. So here's an article by Bethany McLean from Fortune, which happened to occur. I wish I had used it when I did my miscreants ball call. I flew back to Utah, and on the flight I picked up the Fortune. Here's an article by Bethany McLean on Take Two. It's got exactly 3 sources in it. 3 sources. Don Vickery of Gradient, David Rocker, and his partner Mark Cahodes. That's like doing an article on does Iraq have WMD and talking to just Ahmed Chalabi and Don Rumsfeld. Oh, that's Judy Miller, sorry. So my point is that's how they knew. They did know. That's how they knew. That's why they anticipated that certain securities would decline. There is, in short, a closed circle of corruption. The closed circle of corruption includes a small pack of hedge funds, a group of journalists, a research shop, perhaps some players at the SEC who are tipping off exactly when these lawsuits are going to come in, and a law firm called Milberg Weiss. And I'm not saying that everybody's on the take. I think that some of the journalists are on the take. I think some of them are not. I think that some of them are just conformist. A friend of mine who analyzed this put it, a media critic, had a great line for it. They tried to become players, but they became pawns. That's how, and at the end of the day, the money being made out of this is coming from somebody's pocket. And I believe it's coming from your pockets, and if you're not in on it, and it's coming from the pockets of millions of Americans. There's one word you haven't heard yet. One word you may have expected to hear, but you haven't heard. Overstock. See, this is not about overstock, and it's not about Patrick Byrne, it's not about Sith Lords. I think that something is dramatically wrong, unprecedented in our lifetime, in our marketplace. This isn't about us. But the cover-up became to try to make it something, well, let me go to Dan Colarusso. Now, Dan Colarusso was caught on tape, and he's furious that I have this tape. Dan Colarusso was at the time the business editor of the New York Post. Here he was talking to Herb Greenberg, New York Times, Joe Nocera, Dave Kansas, in a small panel. I couldn't find out if Carol, who's in the back of the room, Carol Ramone, was here or not, but just listen. This is the journalistic integrity.
When I think about Patrick Byrne, I mean, we have barrels of ink and stacks of money and all the resources in the world at our disposal, legal and via our media, to crush them.
So that's the paragon of journalist integrity that is Dan Colarusso. Then the next part of the cover-up is, this is all distraction. This is, has this been a good distraction? Have I really distracted people? So this was all a big distraction. And they became the conspiracy theorists, oddly enough.